The 1916 Specimen Coin Set is a truly exclusive representation of the first Australian coins struck on Australian soil. It embodies a major milestone in Australia's economic security, one that was brought forward by the ravages of World War I. Just 60 of these sets were produced, only 19 were ever distributed, and only a fraction of that number survive intact today. On behalf of the Victorian banking community, David MacArthur lobbied the Victorian Colonial Treasurer regarding the need for silver coinage. Specifically, MacArthur requested that the mint already established in Melbourne for the purpose of coining gold be also employed for coining of silver. Discussions came to an abrupt halt in 1875 when Edward Langton, the Victorian Colonial Treasurer, announced it has not been deemed necessary to proceed further with this matter at present. This was next raised by Duncan Gillies, who was the Premier of Victoria in 1890. The Deputy Master of the Melbourne Mint advised Gillies that several logistical challenges would need to be addressed if silver coins were to be produced by a mint on Australian soil. But the trail went cold again shortly after that. It was next very briefly discussed at the Conference of Premiers held in Melbourne in 1898, but no firm action was taken. The subject of Australia's national coinage was explored in earnest from 6th of June 1901, when the Select Committee on Coinage sat for the first time, with the aim of inquiring into a report upon the desirableness and expediency of the Commonwealth coining silver and copper coins and adopting a decimal system of coinage. In 1904, the Deakin Commonwealth Government announced it had made arrangements with the British Government for the coinage of silver for Australia. In 1908, the Commonwealth Treasurer announced his intention of initiating the coinage of silver in the near future. In September 1909, an Act to that effect was passed. Australia's first national coins were struck by the Royal Mint in London. No less than 14 days after the Coinage Act was passed in Canberra, the first coins, shillings, were dispatched by the Royal Mint to Australia. Those shillings arrived in Australia on February the 24th, 1910. Each of the other denominations were in circulation by June 1910. The Royal Mint also struck Australia's first pennies and halfpennies in 1911. Those coins were in circulation by the middle of the year. Over the next 3 years, the Royal Mint outsourced portions of the production of Australia's silver and copper coinage to the Heaton Mint in Birmingham. Following the outbreak of the First World War, the production of Australia's silver and copper coinage was pushed even further afield to the Calcutta Mint in India. The threat posed by Germany's infamous submarines to Allied maritime trade was so great that the transport of all shipments out of England was seriously reconsidered. On November 1, 1915, the Melbourne Mint was instructed by London to prepare for silver coinage. Problems with several of the dies mean each denomination was struck in different stages across 1916. The shillings were the first to be produced. The first was struck in an official ceremony by the Governor of Victoria, Sir Arthur Stanley, on January 10, 1916. At the stamping machine, Sir Arthur Stanley struck the first shilling produced in Australia for circulation, but the coin is not likely to go into actual currency. The Governor was allowed to have it, and he will doubtless keep it as a memento of a notable event. Although the exact dates on which the other denominations were struck across 1916 are not yet known, the annual report for the Melbourne Mint for 1915, written in April 1916, included the note that it is expected that the florins will be available for issue shortly. The threepences were most likely put into circulation around October 1916. Sixpences were struck by the middle of the year. Specimens struck before each production run and set aside. Collectors rightly expect modern coins housed in the same set to have a uniform appearance, yet that expectation is a high bar for Melbourne's silver coinage of 1916. These were literally the very first coins of their type struck in this country. Their machinery had been installed more than 4 decades earlier, they had never worked with silver before, and in the case of the florin, had never struck a coin that size before. Research indicates a very select number of specimens of each denomination were struck before each production run, while the dies were still fresh. The records then indicate the specimens were compiled into sets and stored. That these coins look as good as they do is a solid testimonial to the diligence and skill of the Melbourne Mint staff working under the duress of the First World War.